Hey everybody, it's Brandon here. I'm here with John Laroni for another installment of Coffee with John and Brandon. John, how you doing, buddy?
All things are good. What's going on your end?
Not too much. You got a coffee?
I got my Java.
I got my Timmy's going. Don't judge me though. But man, we should get sponsored with this. You know,
Set it up.
set it up, right? Anyways, all right, guys. So listen, Coffee with John and Brennan. So we are live every Tuesday and Thursday at 12:30 Eastern, and 9:30 Pacific. So basically, we don't. There's no script that's going on here. We get together on Monday and we say, hey, what do we want to talk about on Tuesday and Thursday? And we just throw something together. So we're trying to keep everything very current with respect. So what we figured we would do this week for Tuesday is we were going to talk about some of the changes to medical inadmissibility but parlay that into criminal inadmissibility, right? So the reason we wanted to dive into the medical inadmissibility is because there's going to be some changes to the rules that we wanted to be aware of, right? But we don't want to go too far into that. Sorry, John.
Well, it's really no worries. It's just that we'll talk a little bit about medical inadmissibility, but if you ever feel that you potentially have a medical inadmissibility, it gets so complex. It's probably one of the most complex areas of immigration law because you got to get a physician. Agreed. And even a specialist physicians or a psychiatrist, a psychologist, all these medical professionals involved. So we're not going to get into, any case specifics, anything like that, but it is worth discussing a bit. So that if you or a family member does have a medical issue that it could potentially be a problem, and it's always best to address a potential issue up front than try and fix it down the line, right?
Right. So one of the things that I know is a standard thing that we'll do in our consultations is we'll ask people if they ever had any issues with the law or do they have any serious medical issues, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of times what happens is that these things, one of these sorry, I'm clicking here. So a lot of times what happens is that a lot of people will get back and they'll say things like, oh, I got high blood pressure or something like that. That's not a medical inadmissibility. Okay. So we want to clarify that. The thing is, though, is that, it can get serious, but we look at something called excessive demand. So look, first off, let's get back to why we're talking about this. So there are changes to the rules for medical inadmissibility, and the changes is that they are upping the excessive demand. So John, why don't we just kind of talk really briefly? Let's not dive too far into this because I think there's a lot more people that will have criminal inadmissibility issues and not know it opposed to medical. So why don't we talk about excessive demand?
Let's talk sort of let's define excessive demand. So basically what the feds are saying when they say excessive demand is you've got some sort of condition or illness that is, by their calculation, going to cost Canadian society more money than is reasonable. So, over the years, the government has set what is the limit of excessive demand, right? If you have tuberculosis or HEP, by their calculations, it's going to cost the Canadian medical system X amount of dollars, to keep people up on medication and doctor's visits and potential hospital visits and all that. And if you exceed that threshold of excessive demand, then you're looking at medical inadmissibility. And as Brandon just said, the government is upping the level. So what that means is that those persons who were just over or meeting the excessive demand threshold now will find themselves below it and won't be medically inadmissible. But again, caveats abound. It's so case specific, and that has to be combed over and picked through extensively by a medical professional. And sometimes even, I don't know about you, Brandon, but it does get so complex. I worked with other colleagues and lawyers who specialize in this area specifically to help a client overcome that.
I've actually, I've only ever dealt with it, like I could count them on my hand or less.
Yeah, rare. Very rare.
And a lot of things, again, we ask the question, the government asks the question, they do have a test that they go through, which is basically checking to see if that there's any issues, and it's going to cause excessive demand on the system, i.e. we're bringing in somebody who's going to deplete the resources and take it away from other Canadians. So they are, or on the other side, there's a danger to public health, danger to public safety, or excessive demand. So you know what? I think we should just leave it there because again, these are pretty rare, as John said. There are exemptions for things like, autism is a very popular one with a child, for instance. It's not a deal breaker, okay?
No.
There's like the spectrum is very big. So
and if you
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, Brandon, but also a lot of people out there, even if they do have a medical condition, if it's generally speaking, if it's stable with medication, you're not going to find yourself inadmissible, right? What they're worried about is, constant relapses into, acute episodes, which require a lot of hospitalization. That's kind of a worry. But if you've got, say, a good example is diabetes, and you're totally stable and you just take your insulin and everything's fine, you're not going to be, 99.9% of the cases in that scenario, you're not inadmissible. It's a stable condition.
Yeah. And that's important. So let's wrap it up there because I really want to dive into criminal inadmissibility because that actually is pretty popular, and a lot of people don't know that this is an issue. Yeah, well, you know what I mean, right? But yeah, so let's call it an end on medical inadmissibility. Here's the takeaways, guys. So the rules are changing and they're upping the excessive demand. So that's the first thing. Secondly, these cases are rare, but also very complicated. Thirdly, getting back to the complicated, if there is an issue with this, or there is a concern that's outside of it, it requires very specialized opinions and professionals who can actually speak to that. All right. And what's really important to that too is that you want to make sure prior to doing anything that you lead and you set the tone whenever you file an application. And if you've heard us speak before, we're always all about making sure that you have a strategy and a plan. And this is one of those where you need a really good strategy and you need to know exactly what's going on. Because if you don't, right. A lot of times people will file stuff and they'll say, oh yeah, like, they think they're being helpful. And it's like, no, as a colleague of ours put it when she was a visa officer, you're giving people the rope to hang themselves because, you think, oh, I'll just give them all the info. And then it's like, but what happened? They're just dotting their I's. Right? So you need to plan this out. Okay. Now, let's shift gears, man. Criminal inadmissibility. Before I say anything, though, we just had a Mr. Ahmed. He said, "Hi, how are you? We're doing fine, man. Thanks for tuning in here. Just thought we'd say hello, and we're going to move on to criminal inadmissibility. So, John, what's criminal inadmissibility, John?
Well, I'm just doing a technical thing here, guys. Just give me 1 second. There we go. Criminal inadmissibility is when a person has committed an offense of some sort. It can be a minor offense or it can be a really serious one. But by committing that offense, they make themselves inadmissible to Canada. And it's split between serious criminality and just bog standard criminality, for lack of a better term. It can be overcome normally through I was trying to think. Normally it comes, you're no longer inadmissible after a passage of time if it's considered criminal and not serious criminality. But if you're convicted of serious criminality, then you've got to apply for something called rehabilitation, which means you submit an application to the government of Canada. You say, look, these are the factors that took place during the offense. I now consider myself rehabilitated, and this is complex. I'm putting narrowing and compacting this down, and then you can apply for rehabilitation. And if the government considers you rehabilitated, you then can proceed with your application for permanent residence or temporary residence or whatever application you're applying for. But as Brandon pointed out, much more common to face criminal inadmissibility, and in criminal inadmissibility, the most common is driving under the influence, as they say in the United States, or drunk driving, or driving under the influence, as I said, or I know some of the other terms, impaired driving. These are the most common criminal inadmissibilities I've seen in my career. What about you, Brandon?
Yeah, so let's just take a step back there, right? So there's different types of inadmissibilities. There's the criminality, there's the serious crime, and then there's organized crime type stuff. So I always term that when it's for anybody who wants to go look it up, it's in the section 30s of the act. I call it the naughty bits of the act, right? That's where a lot of those things pop up, right? But serious criminality actually has an effect, and John actually parlayed into that quite nicely, because DUIs, driving under the influence, and impaired driving, et cetera, this is actually really problematic, and more so we find in certain areas of the world. There's a lot of DUIs in certain areas, and a lot of people don't know this. And I'd like to use, John, if you're okay, can we use like an American context? Because this is actually the most popular type of scenario, I would say. So a lot of people, I'll just do an example, because I know you probably have many of these, right, over the years. A lot of people don't know. They think, oh, it was a misdemeanor or whatnot. It's not a big deal, right? It happened a little while ago. So a lot of times what can happen, and how benign this is that people will arrive at the border, and the CBSA officer will say, hey, you have this, blah, blah, blah. Do you ever have a DUI? Well, yeah, but it's many years ago, right? A couple of years ago, big deal, right? Yeah. It is a big deal. Because then what happens is that, that officer can go look all that stuff up. You're actually inadmissible. And we can talk, I guess we can talk and what the remedies are to that. But that's what happens, is people don't understand that until they're actually sitting at the border, for instance. And I'd like to paint this even what a cascading effect this could have. I use the American example because a lot of people will come from the US. They don't require a TRV or a visitor visa, and they'll just show up, and they'll get nabbed at the border, and then they'll have an issue, and then it cascades. And think about that. You're at the border with colleagues, and you're going to do a meeting, and then you get pulled in and raked over the immigration coals and have embarrassing things of your past come out, right? So anyways, DUIs are really common, and I think that's awesome that you brought that up, because that's exactly what's where a lot of this can trigger. If you've you murdered somebody, you can kind of do the math on that might be serious.
Yeah.
But DUIs are not. So, do you want to take anything from that example, John?
Well, there's a remedy. This is bounded about a lot in our profession. Sometimes people don't really understand what it is, what I'm about to tell you. There's something out there called a temporary residence permit. And what that is if you find yourself criminally inadmissible to Canada, you can make an application to a visa officer or a CBSA officer at the border, and say, look, I know I'm inadmissible, but there are compelling reasons for me to get into the country. I've got a job. I've got to go to a family funeral. I've got to be with my family. Generally, there are ways to get into the country if you're inadmissible, and this is called a temporary residence permit. In Brandon's example, years and years and years ago, a long time ago, when I worked at the border when I was young, quite often I know.
Sorry, there's so many things that just popped into my head there. I was going to say, but
yeah,
I'm like, okay.
There are remedies at the border. I would never recommend somebody to go to the border to try and overcome this unless they were absolutely
don't do that
for time. But you can apply for one of these temporary resident permits at the border. If you're, say, in Brandon's example, you're a U.S. visitor coming up, and one of your party is found out to have a DUI and it is inadmissible, then the TRP can be applied for then. But again, best if you know that you're even if you think you might possibly be criminally admissible to Canada, it's always best to address this far in advance. And in fact, I'm sure Brandon does the same thing, but I ask all my clients the simple question: have you ever been detained by the police?
I ask if you've ever been in handcuffs. I got that from Roxanne. It's a good one.
Okay, all right. That could well, you get different answers for that.
Well, yeah, it actually leads into a pretty good joke too. But and I've actually had somebody, what do you mean, by the police? I'm like, yeah, by the police.
Yeah.
But I always thought that was funny. But no, it's have you ever been detained or put in handcuffs? That's kind of my standard go. I was going to say though. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's just that a lot of times people say, "Oh, I've been detained by the police because I got a speeding ticket," or whatever. I was just questioned because there was a crime that was committed nearby, and the police stopped me and detained me just to ask me some questions. Of course, you're not going to be inadmissible in that situation, but again, we ask this to make sure that there's nothing untoward, because it's a terrible thing to have an application prepared and ready to go, and then, oh yeah, I did get a DUI, when I was down in Louisiana 10 years ago, and they just treat it as a misdemeanor. And that's another thing to touch upon, talking specifically about the Americans, is in a lot of American states, the DUI is considered as a misdemeanor. So through no fault of their own, a lot of travelers from the United States figure it's a misdemeanor, it's no big deal, right? Where under Canadian law, driving under the influence is a serious crime.
Yeah, and that's the difference, right? Is that it has to be equated to Canadian law. And so we have things, we have summary and indictable, and we also have hybrid offenses, right? Which is unique here. So a summary offense would be a misdemeanor, an indictable would be, it's escaping me, a felony. And then a hybrid is where it could go either way. But on the other side of that is that on the criminal inadmissibility, they always go with the higher offense. And this is where people get tripped up. And this is where DUIs become serious criminality. So let's get back to the example of somebody with a TRP and they're at the border. So where I kind of scoffed at that with John, because a lot of people, they think, TRP, no big deal. I just show up at the border. They say to the border officer, you got a DUI? And they're like, yeah, I got it. No problem. Where do I pay the $200 fine? Right. That's a good way to have the border officer have his or her blood boil in like 2 seconds. Yeah. Right. It's not just a fine. A TRP, we'll talk about what a TRP is, a temporary residence permit, not to be confused with a TRV, right? A temporary residence visa, which is a visitor visa. This is a tool that's used to overcome an inadmissibility. So for instance, right, if you've got this DUI, the officer just can't say, well, John here looks like a good guy. We'll just let it roll this time. He can come in. No, because it's the law. You can't just kind of throw the law out, right? So with John, sorry, I'm using John, or let's use another name, Ted. Oh, Ted there. Ted had too many shandies. So Ted there has got this issue. yeah, Ted looks like a good guy, we'll let him in. They can't do it. So we have to actually, the border officer would have to use this TRP, which is
Yep.
allows him or her to use their discretion to let him go in. And that's what John was saying about, funerals or meetings or something that is overwhelming. Now, this is a very high level thing, because it actually can't be just like, oh, I'm just coming because it's like, it's our first anniversary and we really, really want to go see Niagara Falls from the other side. No, you can't. That's not compelling enough.
But as Brandon points out, it's discretionary upon the officer. A lot of officers are compelled to make certain decisions in the immigration system based on law, but the temporary resident permit is almost entirely discretionary to usually a senior officer, and so a lot of compelling reasons like a 50th wedding anniversary I have seen work before, actually, but again, it's not something you want to roll the dice and attempt at the border.
No, because you can apply in advance.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, you can do that. Anyways, it's all about understanding and strategy and planning. That's what all this boils down to. Hey man, we're gonna wrap up here soon because we're gonna stick to the time. What do we want to do here? So, you know what? Let's talk about, let's wrap up the criminal inadmissibility, because actually, I don't know if you saw it or not. I did a video with Katina.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
No, I did it like a little while ago. She actually, so Katina's a lawyer that specializes in inadmissibilities, and she does judicial reviews and whatnot. She's based here in Toronto. But the thing that she did that was interesting is that I asked her to do kind of a deep dive. She went over, there's over an hour. It's on YouTube. We'll post up the link here so that people can see that in the comments. And if they're really interested, because that goes into like serious detail on that. But yeah, and it talks about TRPs and deemed rehabilitated and rehabilitation and the different time frames and stuff around that.
I'd like to do that. I'm going to pop over and watch that myself.
Yeah, no, it's good. I just, Katina is really smart. So she just laid it all out and put it down. I think the thing is, and where a lot of people need to understand, is that the trick is that you have to equate it to Canadian law. And that's where the art of that actually really comes in.
Yeah.
So anyways, listen, let's wrap this thing up. I know we got a few people watching right now. So if anybody has any questions, we'll throw that up there. You can throw that in there. We'll just put a quick reminder up there too. So we're live every Tuesday and Thursday. And then actually we've got a thing here. I'm going to share a screen real quick, John. So if people want to connect with us at all, there we go. There's some things that they can do. So first and foremost, we're broadcasting this to a number of different places on Facebook right now, or a few different places. If you want to connect with us, we have a Facebook community for groups. We're going to actually be shifting gears, and we'll be broadcasting in there because we're trying to have people that want to, kind of get the support and different things that they need at different times. So you can go to facebook.com/groups My Second Passport. Again, it doesn't cost you anything to sign up, but it's a good way to stay connected. If you want to learn more about the system, Second Passport, you can grab a copy of the book on Amazon. And again, if you have something that's very personalized, you can reach out to us, mysecondpassport.ca/booking. And, we can help you out that way. But again, other than that, if you have any questions, we're here. You can ask, ask what you want. We are here every Tuesday and Thursday at 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific. And again, if you put something in the group that's a question, and we see it, that it might actually be an expounded topic, we're definitely going to dive into that and
bring your questions on, guys, for sure. Yeah, we always like questions.
Yeah, man. All right. John, I think we'll wrap it up. We'll see you on Thursday. Actually, we talked about this yesterday, guys, but what we're going to do on Thursday is a lot of people, they have the question about, do I need a representative? You know, if I want a representative, is a lawyer better than a consultant, or what's the advantages of that, or whatever. So we were going to kind of dive into that on Thursday, which would be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be a good conversation because it's an important question to ask. And, you know, of course, you know, we're not going to lie. We have a vested interest in, as being immigration consultants, for getting you to at least consider using our services. But, you know, there are situations where, frankly, you don't need our help, and you can do it yourself. And so we'll dive right into that on Thursday.
Yeah, and I think that people need to understand that, and actually, again, they got to have a plan. And then the trickiest thing is for people is, can they actually execute on that plan, and do they know where all the little traps are? Because I can tell you right now, it's not on the government website, and it's certainly not in, you know, forums and talking to people who may or may not know what they're talking about. But anyways, we'll dive into that a little bit. Guys, thank you very much for the people that are watching right now. Really appreciate it. Again, throw some comments in there. Oh, we got one here from Alan. Hi. Hey, Alan. How are you, buddy? Thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. Other than that, that's it. We'll leave it at that. If you guys have any questions, throw it out there, and I guess we'll see you on Thursday. Take care, John. Have a good rest of the week, bud.
Take it easy, Brandon.
Take care, man. Have a good one.